Are you overwhelmed by the challenge of personalizing communication for thousands of students? That's where Element 451's AI assistants come in. From nudging prospective students to guiding those already on their journey, AI assistants don't just automate, they write, build, and optimize every step of your digital campaigns. Discover how at element451.com/AI team.
Welcome to Mastering the Next, a cutting-edge podcast that explores the future of graduate, online, and non-traditional education through the lens of AI and technology. I'm your host, Dr. Ray Lutzky, Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Element 451. Join me for discussions with some of the thought leaders shaping the future of graduate enrollment management through technology. Mastering the Next is a part of the Enrollify network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform that helps institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Building partnerships between universities and companies is an old idea. Today, however, companies need universities more than ever as they seek to make their teams future ready. From upskilling and reskilling to finding ways to reward high-potential employees, sophisticated employers are looking for schools that offer high-quality, affordable online education and are sponsoring tuition through innovative programs like those offered through InStride. Here to talk about building that future-ready workforce is Stephanie Tsales, Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at InStride. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thanks for having me.
This conversation reminds me of a story I heard about a talent professional. It's probably a parable. A talent professional asked a very smart CEO, what happens if we invest in these employees and they all leave? And the CEO responded, what happens if we don't invest in them and they stay? Investing in a future-ready workforce is a way for companies to remain competitive, relevant, and even innovative. And higher education has always played a role in that process. What are you seeing could be next for these types of university-employer partnerships, Stephanie, as we look to the future and really a knowledge economy in the United States?
Yeah, I think InStride sort of acts as a catalyst between academia and industry. They're two groups that really need each other, but they don't always speak the same language and they don't always know how to work together. So in our sort of in-between role as that catalyst, we can really help universities build programming that is relevant for the workforce. I say that lovingly as an English major, right? Helping us to really upskill and right skill the workforce for the jobs of the future. So some of the ways we can do that are through tailored workforce education programs that address specific skill gaps and retention challenges that a company might be facing. We're also seeing some interest in doing some custom program work, maybe custom leadership development, where we can have a really great cohorted experience that uses either simulations or case studies or assignments that are very specific to problems that that company is trying to solve or facing. So it allows the employee to sort of contextualize the experience a little bit more. And then, of course, it can't be a podcast or a conversation about workforce development without talking about, frontline AI-focused coursework and helping to build the digital literacy that frontline employees need to be prepared for the changes that are coming through AI and other technological advancements.
It's interesting. There's a lot there, the tailoring and that custom work. It makes me think that lots of schools have tried and failed, frankly. Lots of schools have tried and failed to offer programs that appeal to employers, even before we got to this place that we are now. And it sounds like you have a strategy to ensure that the programs you're offering are aligned with what the employer partners you have want to offer their employees in terms of for example, AI focused coursework. But when you consider that a lot of schools, faculty have this sort of field of dreams mentality about programs. Like if I build this really cool program in an area that is very, very niche, tons of people will want to enroll in it. And of course, anyone who's done enrollment anywhere ever knows that that's not true. How do you steer those schools? How do you engage those faculty in those schools to ensure that they are aligned? How do you have that conversation?
It's such a great question. And I think that's part of the value that InStride brings to a university or an academic partner is we can bring them sort of this real-time feedback from the market. What are corporations looking for? What are they asking for? And what do they need? And we're able to provide that to them. If they don't want to listen to me, they can listen to the corporations that we partner with and serve, and get some great ideas to plug into their future program strategy. I think, again, a lot of times universities are building these programs that are passion projects or that are, the sort of baby of one faculty member or chair. But to your point, they're not necessarily going to hit the target of what employers are looking for and really, what graduates need. I think we've all seen that survey. I feel like it comes out like once a year where, a university executive is asked, like, how ready are your grads for the workforce? And they're like 100%. And then they're asking on the enterprise side, how ready are recent grads for the workforce? And they're like, not at all. And so I think we can play that role of sort of giving the universities and the academic partners sort of access to that market insight from the corporations that we serve and partner with so that they can make the right types of program decisions.
You can provide all these data. And clearly, when you look at industry ready programs, the STEM fields tend to dominate. You mentioned English earlier. I have a PhD in rhetoric. You're an English major. And we know that in some of those departments, these are faculty who have never maybe worked in industry before and are empowered to make these curriculum decisions and say, yes, this is a very valuable credential. So when you think about it from the industry partner side, you've got clear data. But when you're trying to work with a school to sort of take that look in the mirror, and maybe this is just something you do or something you could suggest to others, how would you suggest a university overcome those kinds of challenges, like that pet project of a faculty member? Is it just sort of see where it goes and then say, well, it didn't work out very much? Or are there ways to try to work with faculty to say, hey, these are things you can do right now that you can incorporate into your program that are really valuable to employers?
Yeah. So I think one is durable skills are not going away. Right. And so as we think about the rise of AI, there is a need for those durable skills, problem solving, communication, a lot of those skills that you learned in your rhetoric degree and I learned as an English major. So as we think about, building programs, we need to make sure that those durable skills are still a part of the learning. But then we also need to think about how do we make this program easier for someone to digest, especially if we think about a learner who's working full time, managing family and community commitments, and trying to learn. So can we take this program, have all of the bones be great, those great durable skills, but then make it maybe stackable, so that learners can have smaller finish lines that they accomplish along the way. I would also hope that, as academic partners think about their program strategy, that they're looking at where are the open jobs, where are the open roles, and what are in those job descriptions, and trying to hold that up as sort of a source of truth against this pet project that they might want to build. And then again, I think the types of academic partners that are drawn to work with someone like InStride are the folks that really do want us to give them very candid feedback and share with them, again, what we're hearing from the market and allow us to say, hey, that other thing that you're building is really interesting, but we don't think that's going to be a right fit for the market. But let's talk about these 3 or 4 or 5 other programs that we do see a demand for that we know will impact the workforce in a positive way.
That impact is really a fascinating focus. And in this podcast before, we've had conversations with Jeff Salingo, with Lev Gonick at Arizona State University. And that is ASU is sort of the genesis story of InStride. I had the privilege of working at InStride for a couple of years and seeing the incredible impact that the programs InStride provides offer. And I'm just curious, what you're seeing from your vantage point about those job descriptions, what are your employer partners doing right now to prepare their employees for future job demands? Can you share examples of the directions they're going in?
Sure, I can share a couple examples and we can talk about it a couple of different ways, right? One is we think about what's happening in healthcare. We know that there are critical roles that there are just shortages for. One of those is surgical technologists. So without enough surgical technologists, the hospital systems can't do surgery at the level that they might be able to if they're properly staffed with surgical technologists. So we were able to really bridge the gap with one of our healthcare systems partners by creating a specialized program to train surgical technologists and ensuring that they could meet their workforce demands in-house. So we were able to train 14 surgical techs for less than what that hospital system was spending annually for one traveling OR tech, right? So we reduced the reliance on external contractors. We allowed them to bring it in-house, and we were able to generate 14 surgical techs for less than what they were spending for one traveling OR tech. So that's one way that we sort of think about impact. We also think about impact as it relates to the take rate and how many people are actually utilizing this benefit. I think we all know that the take rate for traditional tuition reimbursement programs is low, like single digit low, like less than 5% low. And when we look at companies like Desert Financial, we've been able to take their education benefit program and make it a really popular workplace perk with like a 32% participation rate. Again, I'm an English major. I'm not a math major, but I think that's like 1,600% higher than your traditional tuition reimbursement program.
Definitely higher. I'm not.
I was told there would be no math in this podcast. But 32% is a great participation rate. So when we think about impact and we think about results and we think about a meaningful part of that workforce that is using that benefit. And I think that's an important piece of this. We're not designing programs that look great in a brochure or on a career page that are actually impossible for employees to use. We are creating programs that we want employees to participate in, and we want to make it easy for employees to participate so that they can upskill, right skill, and have the career mobility that they're looking for.
You make an interesting point about the old model. And I'm just curious if you've encountered resistance to the approach you're offering, because I mean, it requires measuring the success of the past model, and it is not great. You just pointed out an important statistic. Anyone who works anywhere that has tuition benefits, even universities, knows that not a lot of folks, even who work at universities, take advantage of the tuition remission offered there for themselves, maybe for their dependents. So how do you overcome that? How do you get a company to look at education as an investment that they can measure the outcomes of and see that ROI? Is that a sea change for a company? Or I mean, it sounds like you're seeing companies that are doing this.
Yes, we are seeing companies that are doing this. And I think when we think about the decision that an employer makes, it's either status quo and they keep doing what they've been doing, which has led to employee turnover, which has led to gaps in their workforce or future facing gaps in their workforce. So that's not the best option. And so if they take the option of really designing a strategic education benefit program, they're going to see ROI in a couple of ways, right? One is on that employee retention. If an employee is learning and is invested in, they're going to stay longer. Ideally, as they stay longer, they're going to have internal mobility. We see employees who are taking advantage of an education benefit program promoting it like 3x the rate that non-participating employees are. So those are a couple of ways that we can really, track ROI, because there's a real cost savings from reduced turnover. So if an employee is going to stay longer, you don't have to sort of hire someone and retrain them. I always think about it as the bell curve. An employee starts, they're adding very little value because they're learning their new role. And then they start to add a lot of value. And then as they get burned out or start to come, down the other side of the bell curve, you're losing that productivity. So if you can keep them in that high performing space longer, there's real money savings there. And we see like a 226% average ROI across our employee partners. So it really isn't just an expense, it's a high yield investment in human beings.
When universities think about workforce education, they don't like thinking about it in terms of employees and skills and things. I think they like to think of it, from my experience, in terms of opportunity. And where that brings a lot of conversations I have is to the completion students, the 40 million or so Americans out there with some college but no degree in the workforce doing whatever. And that tends to be a focus. And that is really a great way to reward an employee, to keep them loyal, to get them engaged and excited. I'm curious, though, because I also hear that the master's is the new bachelor's, whether you're seeing that kind of uptake in graduate education, or if it's more nuanced, or if there are really specific fields where you think graduate education is going to be a player here versus undergraduate education, where if you look at completion programs, many of them are the standard undergraduate degrees because we're trying to get all those credits into one degree and get them to have what they want, that credential. But on the master's side, it's much more specialized. Do you see a nuanced difference there on the graduate education side?
I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in graduate education, but what I will tell you that we're seeing, and I think this tracks with most of what you are probably reading about, is we're seeing a real interest in non-degree options. So folks who might already have a degree, looking to skill up around AI or prompt engineering, or looking to get better at data analytics. And so we're seeing a real interest on the non-degree side. I think it's a little bit lower of a commitment. I might be afraid of applying to graduate school. I might be afraid of getting rejected from graduate school. I also might need some scaffolding or support to help me prepare to successfully execute in a graduate program. And I can do that through some non-degree options that might help me build some of the core skills and competencies that I'll need as a graduate student.
And you could pretend to be an expert on graduate education. I think most people on this podcast do. And so, including me. But that's a really good point, Stephanie. The idea that these short form credentials, non-degree credentials, potentially stackable, potentially not, have a lower barrier to entry and a higher ROI in terms of the specific skills. And you've mentioned AI skills and skills in healthcare, very specialized, and a way, I would think, for a company to retain employees that otherwise their jobs may not be as relevant or necessary anymore, that by upskilling those employees, you're actually creating more opportunity for them to stay employed without having them go through a whole degree. So it almost seems like it makes more sense for them to be doing non-degree credentials. I don't know if that's a question. It's just sort of an observation from your answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an ecosystem of both. Right. I think that sometimes folks feel like the non-degree options are competing against the degree options for enrollments. But the reality of it is learners want and need both at different times in their workforce journey. And so it's an ecosystem of and everything can live in that ecosystem together. Just learn something. I don't care if it's enrolled in a degree or in a graduate degree or in a short course, just learn something.
Based on that, and based on the need for skills, and based on the fact that not only are universities offering these short form credentials, but companies are. Google and others have really robust credentials out there. So there's this blurring of lines between higher education and employers and companies when it comes to upskilling and reskilling and education. So I'm curious, just use your crystal ball, help us understand how you see this landscape changing and evolving. It sounds like InStride is facilitating some of that change already, but where do you see all this going?
Companies want education that's connected to their company strategy. And the companies that we work with are looking for workforce education programs that connect to their strategy and that drive their bottom line growth. Again, these aren't just benefits that sort of look nice in an HR benefits suite. But the reality of it is the future of work is like a moving target. And our job is to equip employees with the sort of agility to hit that target no matter where it moves.
I think we're going to leave it there, and I'm excited to see what happens next at InStride. And I really appreciate your time, Stephanie. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So here's my take. Workforce education is a new paradigm for higher ed. Schools need to focus on short-form credentials with a low barrier to entry. And that's not just the knowledge required to enter those credentials, but the cost of the delivery, the tuition attached to those credentials. And they need to be online and flexible, not just for the learner, but for the employer who's going to provide those to their employees. For universities looking to find employers who will sponsor the tuition of these programs, it means tailoring your programs. It means looking at the in-demand skills and jobs and finding ways to offer programs that align with those and avoiding that field of dreams mentality when designing new credentials. If you build it, they will not come and they certainly won't pay for it. So finding ways to create programs that are job relevant, short form, easily accessible. Even the humanities and social sciences can be job relevant when that approach is taken. It is up to higher ed leaders to find ways to make their offerings more consumable and accessible for a workforce that is eager to be future ready, but they have to provide that high return on investment for the employers who will be sponsoring. The Mastering the Next podcast is a part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Artis Cadieux, J.C. Bonilla, Mallory Wilsey, Brendan Henkel, Brian Gross, and so many other of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.